Top 11 Sci-Fi Horror Games. Science fiction is a genre that lends itself to horror nicely. There's something about the combination of science fiction and horror that elicits the greatest amount of anxiety and dread. Whether it's the sheer solitude of space or the chance of encountering horrifying new creatures, there's guaranteed to be something in sci-fi horror that will make you feel uneasy, if not terrified. Although there are a lot of sci-fi horror games out there these days, discovering good ones is a gratifying experience. Sci-fi horror games may make even the hardest gamers sleep with the lights on, thanks to its gloomy ambience, which includes blood-soaked halls, uncomfortably silent moments, and monsters creeping in the shadows. Many of these games were inspired by scary sci-fi horror films from the past, such as John Carpenter's The Thing or Ridley Scott's Alien. In many situations, though, today's sci-fi horror games are scarier than their film equivalents because they are more immersive. Players must feel the dread alongside the character they're playing, rather than just seeing it happen to the actors on screen. Both the player and the character are exposed to the jump scares, the atmosphere, and the gore at the same time. Even within this terrible genre, certain games stand out as the most terrifying, distressing, and difficult to play through without turning on the lights. In this video, we will be looking at 11 such games which are perfect for a chill night or a thrill night. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Alien Isolation, 2014. Being a hunter is one thing, but being the prey is another. That is certainly true with Alien Isolation, which is undoubtedly the finest adaptation of the 1979 film that terrified moviegoers. The scenery, the eerie atmosphere, the gore, and the unbelievably silent xenomorph are all components that flawlessly immerse the player in that reality. The run-and-hide system in Isolation is the worst aspect because the xenomorph can't actually be destroyed. The xenomorph will ultimately discover and destroy its target, whether players hide in lockers or behind desks. It is, according to some fans, the genuine sequel to the original masterpiece. Alien Isolation isn't really amnesia-level frightening, but it does a fantastic job of instilling feelings of anxiety and stress throughout the game. The environment of an abandoned space station, which has been ravaged by scavengers who are willing to murder you by any means, is ideal for horror buffs. Isolation is based on the Alien film franchise and follows engineer Amanda Ripley, daughter of Alien lead Ellen Ripley, as she investigates her mother's abduction 15 years after the events of the original 1979 film Alien. The game focuses on stealth and survival horror gameplay, with the player using equipment like a motion tracker and a flamethrower to evade and outsmart a single alien entity. This game was made to appear like the original Alien, rather than the more action-oriented 1986 sequel Aliens, and it offers a similar lo-fi 1970s vision of the future. It's powered by an engine designed to handle the aliens' behavior, as well as technical factors like ambiance and lighting effects. Alien Isolation was originally planned to be a third-person game, but Creative Assembly opted for first-person to offer a more immersive experience. Several downloadable material packs were made available, with some of them reenacting sequences from the original film. It's a single-player action-adventure game with a focus on stealth and horror survival. From a first-person perspective, the player controls Amanda Ripley as she explores a space station and completes goals while evading, outsmarting, and destroying opponents. The goals might range from turning on computers to collecting specified goods or reaching a specific location. Running, climbing ladders, sneaking inside vents, crouching behind items to interrupt attackers' line of sight, and peeking over or leaning around for a safe view are all options available to the player. To hide from adversaries, the player can even go beneath tables or into vacant lockers. Just ask anyone unlucky enough to find oneself on Sevastopol, and I am sure they will tell you that Alien Isolation is one of the most difficult and horrifying games ever created. Soma, 2015. It doesn't have to be set in space just because it's science fiction. Soma is a science fiction horror game set in the future at an undersea facility. It follows Alien Isolation's run-and-hide concept, but it additionally alters the scenery and mood to fit the universe it's set in. Soma is full of mystery and unanswered mysteries, such as who the protagonist is, what the humanoid robots are, and what happened to the undersea facility's workers. Furthermore, Soma features a few twists and turns that will surprise and please horror aficionados, as well as some philosophical ideas that may keep players up at night. Instead of the typical scares featured in most video games in the category, Soma focuses on psychological horror components. The narrative is set on an undersea remote research facility, with equipment that has human traits like awareness. Simon Jarrett, a fish-out-of-water protagonist, arrives there under odd circumstances and sets out to learn about its past while trying to make sense of his situation and possible future. Soma expands on the standards established in Frictional Games' earlier horror games, such as a focus on stealthy avoidance of hazards, puzzle solving, and immersion. However, it de-emphasizes issues such as inventory management in favor of a tighter focus on the story, which is obviously a departure from tradition. It isn't the first time the notion of artificial intelligence has been addressed in science fiction, but it makes especially clever use of video game tropes to depict those basic themes in new and surprising ways. The horrors are tremendous, but you'll find yourself pulled to the gentler periods, which include philosophical yet unpretentious storytelling that is free of unintuitive riddles and monsters that are impossible to control.
A worm crawled up my arm and rested on my neck. When he whispered into my ear, I felt a tingle. He told me how to make a weapon that would help us against our enemies. And here's the thing, it's made of worms.
System Shock 2, 1999. The fact that System Shock 2 is the oldest game on our list should not deter you. It is also one of the greatest. While there are a few features of the game that appear obsolete when played now, System Shock 2 manages to maintain its frightening mood in a manner that few other games can. If you had to pick one sci-fi horror game that embodies everything the genre should be, System Shock 2 would be it. It has it all: a gripping tale, a dark and dystopian design, and superb first-person shooting gameplay. The game starts with you waking up in a cryo chamber on board the first starship capable of traveling faster than light. The spaceship was seen as the future of human space travel, and there were enormous expectations for it. When you wake up, though, everyone is dead, and you must figure out why. The game takes place on board a starship in the year 2114 in a cyberpunk setting. The player takes on the role of a soldier attempting to stop a genetic illness from destroying the ship. The gameplay is similar to System Shock, in that it includes first-person combat and exploration. It also has aspects of a role-playing system, in which the player may learn and develop talents and attributes like hacking and psychic powers. The game's gameplay concept was achieved by portraying the experience as a normal first-person shooter and adding a character customization and development system, both of which are regarded as characteristic role-playing components. To combat adversaries, the player employs melee and projectile weapons, while a role-playing system allows the player to learn valuable talents. A heads-up display provides character and weapon information, a map, and a drag-and-drop inventory. Navigation is displayed from a first-person perspective. Also, the history is revealed gradually as the player collects audio recordings and has interactions with ghostly apparitions. This game seamlessly blends science fiction with survival horror, FPS gameplay with the role-playing genre's character attributes, upgrades, inventory system, and fast-paced action with chilling fear. The game begins to consume you whole as you slowly and carefully examine your surroundings, and you soon find yourself entirely immersed in the horrific reality of an interplanetary ghost ship. Then, even years after your initial encounter with the game, hearing the words System Shock 2 will cause your heartbeat to accelerate. Prey, 2017. Prey is one of those games where the gameplay mechanics stand out. Prey, like BioShock, takes the concept of diverse video game weapons to a whole new level. The experience of crafting and improving all of Prey's weaponry is enjoyable and addicting, but the horror components are found in the surroundings. Mimics are creatures that can disguise themselves as random objects in any room, causing anxiety with each step towards the character's goals. The game is set in an alternate history, where an accelerated space race has resulted in humanity reaching orbital stations far sooner than expected. Morgan Yu is a member of a scientific team researching the Typhoon, a hostile alien force composed of many forms with both physical and psychic powers, such as shapeshifting into a clone of any inanimate object on the space station Talos 1, in orbit around the planet L2, where they were a member of a scientific team researching the Typhoon, a hostile alien force composed of many forms with both physical and psychic abilities, such as shapeshifting into a clone of any inanimate object. While attempting to flee the station, the player employs a range of weapons and skills borrowed from the Typhoon to avoid being killed. By gaining essential objects and skills, the player obtains access to various regions of the station, ultimately allowing the player to investigate the station in an open-world scenario. The game's design incorporates aspects of role-playing video games, stealth games, immersive simulations, and Metroidvanias. The player can choose key characteristics of Morgan, such as gender, as well as make decisions that affect the game's plot. To fend off and kill the Typhoon, the player must acquire and employ weaponry and resources aboard the station. The station is totally continuous, rather than having different stages or tasks, according to creative director Rafael Colantonio, and at times requires the player to return to regions they previously visited. Prey is simply competent when it appears to be a shooter. Prey is a very effective archaeological expedition, and it manages to compellingly meditate on what it means to be a mystery, a deep space haunted house with hundreds of stories of sorrow and humanity to tell. Dead Space, 2008. Any of the Dead Space games may have made this list, but being the series' originator and the game that kicks off this fantastic space horror genre, the original Dead Space game takes precedence over the rest. This game is based on John Carpenter's The Thing and has gore, body horror, scary surroundings, story twists, and sci-fi aspects for horror enthusiasts. Isaac Clarke, the protagonist, is a space engineer who is part of a crew sent out to repair a broken mining ship. However, as they arrive, they quickly find the horrors that await them within. Despite the fact that Dead Space was launched in 2008, it still has fantastic visuals and exciting gameplay, and it's worth playing for those who haven't already. You've been sent to examine the USG Ishimura, a colonized starship that has mysteriously stopped communicating. The game is a third-person shooter in which you must explore the space station in search of information as to what transpired. Meanwhile, you're being pursued and hunted by a swarm of extraterrestrial creatures with limbs sprouting from every orifice. Players control the starship Ishimura, accomplishing missions assigned to Isaac throughout the story, involving physics-based puzzles in the environment, and fighting Necromorph, the enemies. Isaac has a limited amount of air in the vacuum, which may be refilled by discovering air tanks across the environment. Some sections are affected by zero-G, allowing Isaac and certain opponent kinds to leap across surfaces. These areas have their own problems. Isaac discovers ammo, health pickups, and nodes while exploring the Ishimura, which are required to unlock unique doors and improve weapons and Isaac's suit. Isaac may visit a store to buy supplies and ammo, as well as utilize a navigation line to discover the next mission goal. At various spots throughout the ship, one thing the game excels at is creating a tense atmosphere that is the ideal blend of mystery and terror. Dead Space is a game that blends horror with science fiction like no other, and it's a must-play for any lover of the genre. Syndrome, 2016. Syndrome is a first-person survival horror game set on board a stricken spacecraft, in which players must slip past hideous beasts while working slowly to fix the ship's systems. The game mainly shines because of its solid grasp of mood building and excellent visual design. You are Officer Galen, a member of a starship crew who is awoken from a cryo-sleep after an undetermined period of time. Everyone else on board the spacecraft is either dead, missing, or has converted into half-mechanical, fully violent monstrosities. Much to his terror and amazement, Galen sets out to discover what has caused the ship's plight, aided by a pair of survivors who appear to have their own motives as the narrative develops. Galen is afflicted by strange occurrences, such as voices that seem to have no source and hallucinations of once living friends, in addition to interpersonal strain. The syndrome may be thought of as a simplified version of System Shock in terms of design. It has the same blend of technical horror visuals and stealth action gameplay as that famous game, but without the character development and more traditional role-playing aspects. You move throughout the ship using one of several weapons, which range from a multi-purpose wrench to a fast-firing assault rifle. The little ammo available and the existence of difficult-to-kill cyborg foes, however, detract from combat. As a result, a large chunk of the game is spent avoiding or hiding from enemies, which you might find to be a welcome change of pace from straightforward action games. Another important component of Syndrome is exploration. The player will have to go between different levels of a ship in order to advance events and maintain a supply of essential commodities. Players always have access to a map, which is vital because many parts of the ship have been left unusable due to rubble and fire. This requires finding the right passageways, going back to previously explored regions to find new items, and making use of the ship's numerous ventilation vents. Fortunately, the game's surroundings are well designed to allow the player to freely walk about and discover new parts or rooms. The mood is appropriate, the presentation is skillfully constructed, and the game sets and achieves an attainable goal of being compellingly frightening. Moons of Madness, 2019. Moons of Madness puts players in the shoes of a protagonist trying to discover what happened to the crew and where the monstrous beast came from on a research facility on Mars. Although numerous horror games have adapted Lovecraft's horror stories for video games, Moons of Madness takes the H.P. Lovecraft aesthetics and applies it to a futuristic sci-fi scenario. Moons of Madness is based on Funcom's Secret World Legends' rich narrative and mythology. Both games are set in the same universe, but you don't have to play one to enjoy the other. You take on the role of Shane Newhart, a Martian engineer. The game begins with him having a nightmare, which teases what's to come before you go about his everyday routine for a few hours. Naturally, certain things that shouldn't be appear. and things go awry. The story of Moons of Madness is very strong, despite the fact that it is familiar in many ways. The writing and dialogues are both superb, and the narrative held my attention throughout. The finest part is how much of it leans toward science fiction, combining old tropes with mathematics, chemistry, and botany. These features contribute significantly to the game's unique personality. Shane has a few particular chores to complete, and they involve more than merely traveling from one location to the next. As an engineer, he must, for example, reconfigure certain solar panels during the game's opening act. This entails locating the airlock, donning his helmet, recharging his oxygen supply, depressuring the airlock, and finally, stepping out onto Mars' surface. He then boards the base's rover and embarks on his journey. Because he's on Mars, these airlock hijinks are all too regular. This segment of the game also does a fantastic job of providing you a glimpse into his everyday existence before everything goes to hell. Moons of Madness isn't terrifying, but I think it's worth playing because of its diversity, good plot, and solid puzzles. It'll probably satisfy your craving for a Lovecraftian tale or an atmospheric science fiction game. Observer, 2017. When you combine cyberpunk and horror, you've got a winning formula. That's precisely what Blooper Team created with Observer. You play as an investigator, Lazarski, in 2084 Poland, as you navigate the wet, neon-lit Krakowian terrain. The nanophage has handed over control of the war-torn country to megacorporation Chiron, which has tasked Lazarski with assignments that require him to hack into people's thoughts. Indeed, cybernetics play an important role in Observer, as a series of clues steadily unwrap the nuances of a world riddled with weird and evocative events. The game requires a lot of exploration, analyzing, and understanding. As you use Lazarski's biological and electrical augmentations, you find yourself uncovering memories of individuals you don't want to remember, culminating in a horrific conclusion that can only be experienced by playing the game. The game was created by a group of roughly 30 people utilizing Unreal Engine 4. One of the main influences is Rutger Hauer, who was also in Blade Runner. The score was created by Arkadiusz Rakowski, who infused it with choral, diegetic, and ambient music. Observer is a psychological horror video game that is played in first person. Daniel Lazarski, a Krakowian investigator with the Observer's police squad, is the player's character. With a gadget known as the Dream Eater, he can hack people's brain implants for interrogation purposes. He can analyze and highlight particular items in his environment using augmented vision, which is divided into electromagnetic vision, which scans for electromagnetic devices, and biovision, which searches for biological evidence. Interacting with and inspecting objects is possible, although communicating with non-player characters is done through conversation trees. Collectibles include nanophage cards, patient data, radio-controlled automobiles, and flowers. Through computer terminals that can also read papers, a minigame called With Fire and Sword Spiders may be accessed. It's a game that combines science fiction with horror in a narrative that will engross you and keep you thinking for weeks. The Thing, 2002. John Carpenter's 1982 horror movie The Thing is universally considered as a masterpiece. Because of its horrifying visuals and amazing use of visual effects, it became one of the most remembered horror films of its time. The Thing, the video game, published in 2002, captures the film's terrifying atmosphere, while also offering a terrifying horror experience to players. The video game version of The Thing is more of a sequel than a direct adaptation of the source material. Players take control of a U.S. Special Forces commanding officer whose squad is ordered to investigate Outpost 31 after the events of the film. The group discovers an alien life form that is causing havoc on the outpost over time. The scary alien-like parasite can transform into any live species it comes into contact with, making it difficult to locate and remove. The players and their little militia must track down the alien beast and put an end to its reign of terror. The primary gameplay of The Thing is that of a normal third-person shooter, with the player character Blake being able to run and shoot, strafe, crouch, interact with the environment, talk with NPCs, and use items such as flashlights, fire extinguishers, and flares. The user may also transition to a first-person perspective for more precise targeting while battling. In first-person mode, however, the player may only sidestep a little to the left and right. Some of the weapons available are pistols, grenades, sniper rifles, flamethrowers, shotguns, machine guns, assault rifles, grenade launchers, and mounted heavy machine guns. Other items in the game include health packs, explosives, ammunition, portable blood test kits, and adrenaline injections. Enemies are divided into 3 categories. Scuttlers are little animals created from the limbs and appendages of afflicted individuals. They are fast, yet weak, and may be killed with a single shot. Walkers are more powerful and larger than scuttlers. To kill them, the player must first weaken them with weapons before using the flamethrower, as only fire can completely kill them. Bosses are significantly larger and more powerful than walkers, and while each one requires a different strategy to defeat, the essential premise remains the same. Use gunfire to weaken it before burning it. One of the game's significant components is the addition of multiple NPCs that accompany Blake at various points during the game. The player can command up to 4 characters at any given time, Blake and 3 non-player characters. The 3 types of NPCs in the game are engineers, soldiers, and medics. The Thing is well-paced and has a wide range of levels, and has some of the most original and greatest squad-based gameplay ever seen on a console. I'm looking forward to seeing what they accomplish with the sequel, keeping my fingers crossed. Hellpoint 2020. Hellpoint is an action RPG released in 2020. The player assumes the character of an unnamed humanoid stuck on the abandoned space station Irid Novo, and must combat deadly monsters to uncover the mysteries of the events that occurred there. Irid Novo orbits a giant black hole, and the position of the station in regard to the black hole has an impact on enemy strength. The gameplay of Hellpoint is mostly focused on fighting. The player's arsenal includes both light and heavy assaults, as well as an evasion mechanic. At breaches that do not restore adversaries after a specified period of time, the game progress can be preserved. It is possible to store up to 2 healing injections. Dealing damage to creatures refills the healing gauge. Exploration is a big part of the game, and there are a lot of mysteries to find. They might be hidden behind secret doors, or in otherwise unreachable locations that can be reached by using the leap mechanism. Due to gameplay elements that are comparable to other titles such as Dark Souls and Bloodborne, the game has been termed a Souls-like game. Hellpoint is a very amazing game visually. I'd really stop and gaze for a few minutes as I'd exit a path and emerge onto a terrace that views a sea of stars and whirling hues. Interiors are similarly styled, with bright, eye-catching hues that contrast beautifully with the gloomy, decaying tone. You may be wandering a completely pitch-black corridor with foes lurching at you from all sides, and suddenly, you might be strolling through the Bifrost to Asgard. Despite the enormous differences in color palettes and lighting, everything feels consistent and unified. From a design standpoint, there was certainly a lot of love and attention put into the world construction. The advancement system is a big part of what makes the battle so enjoyable. Not only can you upgrade weapons at terminals to increase their general stats and add modifications, but you can also unlock unique powers by using the same weapon for a few hours. One of my swords, for example, increases in length to deal with the extra damage, while my hand axe emanates an ethereal light that may be used as a projectile. There's a wide range of weapons available, from simple one-handed combat weapons and shields to gigantic metal hunks and spears, and even railguns. Yes, firearms. It takes a time to locate ranged weapons worth employing and to raise your stats to the point where you can shoot them accurately, but they can be quite powerful and drastically alter the tempo of battles. Hellpoint delivers some satisfyingly nasty action in an old-school video game setting. Doom 3, 2004. The weight of anticipation surrounding Doom 3's release in 2004 polarized instant reactions to the game. However, as time has passed, the game has grown in popularity as a respectable sci-fi horror thriller and one of the best additions to the iconic Doom series. This game is a masterclass in combining immersion building, outstanding sound design, and a degree of blood and gore that will give even the most ardent horror fans the creeps. However, the game is much more than simply violent graphics and horrible enemies. Doom 3 immerses you in the setting of Mars City right away, making you care about the people and preparing you for the devastation that follows. Doom 3 takes place in 2145 on Mars, where a military-industrial corporation has established a scientific research center focused on teleportation, biological research, and sophisticated weapon creation. The teleportation experiments open a portal to hell, culminating in a demon invasion of the Mars facility, which is devastating. The player takes control of a space marine who must battle his way through the base in order to prevent the demons from assaulting Mars and reaching Earth. It's a first-person action game with a tale to tell. The main goal, like in previous Doom games, is to successfully complete each level by battling a variety of opponent adversaries bent on eliminating the player's character. However, because of Doom 3's story-driven approach, the player frequently encounters nice non-player characters that give important narrative information, missions, and inventory items. The game has 11 weapons for the player to utilize in order to live, including standard guns such as submachine pistol, shotgun, and grenades, experimental plasma weaponry, and the Doom franchise's deadly BFG 9000, and chainsaw weapons. Enemies appear in a variety of shapes and sizes, with varying talents and strategies, but they always fall into one of two categories: zombies or demons. Zombies are people who have been possessed by demonic powers who assault the player's character with their hands and melee weapons, as well as a range of weaponry, while demons are creatures from hell that strike with claws and spines or create plasma-based fireballs. After death, demons' bodies are turned to ashes, leaving no sign of their existence. The game stages are semi-linear and include a variety of horror aspects, the most notable of which is darkness. This design decision is meant to elicit feelings of dread and anxiety in the player, as well as to create a more dangerous gaming environment in which the player is less likely to spot attacking foes. This element is further reinforced by the fact that the player must choose between holding a weapon and holding the flashlight when entering a room, requiring the player to choose between being able to see and having a ready weapon, resulting in a more methodical pace. Furthermore, the levels are frequently littered with corpses, severed body parts, and blood, which are occasionally employed in conjunction with the game's lighting to confuse the player. It doesn't matter how you do it. The gaming industry is all about entertaining. Doom 3 is a fun game to play, as long as you don't expect it to revolutionize first-person shooters. When it boils down to it, it's a fairly simple game. Everything works well, but Doom 3's basic gameplay consists of you rushing from room to room blasting stuff with little in between. That's it for this one, guys. If you liked this video, please do like, share, and comment your suggestions on our next video. See you soon.